I'm Chloe Parker, and this is my final project for Human Growth and Development. For learning objective 1, we had to describe, compare, and contrast major theoretical perspectives. So for my cognitive theories, I chose Piaget's theory of cognitive development, which really places our development in stages. The stages are like the sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. And then Vygotsky's social constructivist theory. He explains that children build their knowledge off of those around them who might be more knowledgeable, and he is kind of known for his zone of proximal development, which describes the task that these children might learn with the guidance from others who are more knowledgeable. So to compare and contrast these theories, I said that these theories are alike in the way that they both emphasize growth and they recognize that there are different stages of development. Piaget recognizes distinct stages like pre-operational and operational, but Vygotsky's stages are more vague. He separates them into those who know how to complete a task and those who need assistance. These stages differ because Vygotsky does not recognize or have a timeline for distinct stages as Piaget does. Piaget believes that children will reach the stages at a specific time on their own, which is the complete opposite idea of Vygotsky's theory that children work toward an outcome with the help of others. For my socio-emotional theories, I use Bandura's social learning theory. That's the theory that we learn from observing others and imitating their actions. And maybe an example of that would be Bailey notices that her friend is doing well on her chemistry exams, so Bailey watches the way that her friend studies and begins to imitate her strategy so that she can do well on her chemistry exams. My next theory would be Erikson's psychosocial theory. Erikson places children into stages describing development. These stages include trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame, doubt versus initiative versus guilt, and industry versus inferiority, identity role versus role confusion, intimacy versus isolation, etc. So one example of that would be Brad is a young adult in a serious relationship. This would be considered the intimacy versus isolation stage, and he has chosen to take the intimacy route. My first scholarly source that I used, so I explained a study that was conducted in 2023 concerning the effects on gender identity, expression, and overall life trajectory of children through the lens of Bandura's social learning theory. This study just kind of expresses how gender expectations are partly caused by the social learning theory. Children observe other children's clothing choices, language, the way that they act, etc. And this shows that the social learning theory can be used to describe a wide range of developmental subjects, and the outcomes might differ based on what's currently acceptable in society. To compare and contrast these two, I said that these theories are similar because they both describe social expectations for learning. They explain how our personality and tendencies develop throughout life. These two theories are different because Erikson's theory states that personality will develop in 8 stages, but Bandura's theory doesn't mention any distinct stages. He believes that personality will continue to change throughout life based on the experiences that we encounter. Next up, I have biological theories. So my first one was Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory, where he emphasizes the relationship between an individual and their environment. And then I have Pavlov's classical conditioning, and this explains how we learn to associate stimuli with our environment, and he emphasizes the unconditioned conditioned stimulus and the response. An example of that one would be Sam gets excited when she gets home from school because she knows that she's going to get an after-school treat. To compare and contrast these two theories, I believe that they're similar because they relate to our development and the way that we act towards our living environment, but they're different because Bronfenbrenner looks at our entire ecological system through breaking it up into different parts. Pavlov doesn't focus on the different parts of the environment, but rather focuses on what parts we associate with a certain response. So for learning outcome 2, or learning objective 2, we needed to identify the contextual, biological, and psychological processes that influence development across the lifespan. So for my contextual, I noted social class and historical period. For social class, I said that social class or socioeconomic status is one factor that influences development across the whole lifespan. This is often based on education, income, jobs. Members of the same class are likely to just have a similar lifestyle. And then for historical period, the time where someone was born or when they grow up, whatever historical period they're in, determines what they're going to experience. I mean, everybody growing up around the 2000s obviously experienced somewhat of the same childhood or same experiences. For biological, I have genetics. So genetics play a huge role in our development. Our genes ultimately determine our physical traits, some behaviors, the abilities of our bodies, what illnesses or maybe disorders we could develop. And then nutrition is another example of a biological influence. Nutrition is an influence that may have different effects throughout our life. As a child, it's important that you receive nutrients to develop properly. And it is important later on in life as well. For psychological, I noted family life and attachment style. So family life is something that often has psychological influences on individuals. This includes many situations like divorce and abuse, neglect, or adverse childhood experiences. They've been linked to risky behaviors, chronic health conditions, low life potential, and maybe even early death. And then attachment style, the type of attachment style developed by a child influences their development. Those with more consistent caregivers might form secure attachments, while those lacking may not ever be able to form those correct attachments. So my second scholarly source is a study conducted on a parental influence in relation to well-being and emerging adulthood. The experimenters found that parenting styles had significant effects on basic psychological needs of the children later in life. The study also found relation between parenting and the well-being of the children. This is a great example of the psychological effects that result from family life and the influence of family. For learning objective 3, describe and distinguish among the research methods and designs used in developmental psychology. So first I have a descriptive research, which is a type of research where you describe what's happening at a particular point in time. This research would be used when studying experiences of behavior. It would really just occur as the behaviors happen in present time. Next we have experimental research. Experimental research is where someone might manipulate a variable to see what the effect would be on the people in the study. And this type of research would be used when the researcher is looking to identify a cause and effect relationship in the study. My third scholarly source is an article that was written in 2024. A study was conducted on elderly individuals in regard to loneliness perceptions and psychological dependence on smoking. In this study, researchers observed and took note of the things that they saw. They did not interfere with the variables in the study. Researchers were able to identify the relationship between loneliness and these individuals and their desires to smoke. This is the perfect example of descriptive research, as the experimenters describe their findings without interfering, as they might have in another kind of research. So, for normative physical developments, I listed physical growth as one of mine. So basically, just as a summary of this, I go through the normative kind of plan for physical growth. An average newborn should weigh between 5 and 10 pounds. This should quadruple in weight by toddlerhood. And I just continued to tell what the average growth should be. And then next, I listed normative brain development for my next physical development. I kind of explained through this how the brain should grow as your body grows. So, for example, in an infant and toddler, the brain should form thousands of neural connections. This is a period of rapid growth for the brain. And in childhood, the brain should grow to be almost 95% of its adult weight. My fourth scholarly source was an article published in 2024 where researchers looked into demographic factors and feeding patterns in Malaysia with plans to predict the BMI of children with learning disabilities. These researchers were able to conclude that positive feeding patterns for children with learning disabilities helpfully address good nutrition. This article is an example of how parents can contribute to normative and healthy developments in children. For normative cognitive developments, I listed memory as one of mine. So memory falls into the category of cognitive developments, and it changes a lot throughout the lifespan. During infancy, you're not expected to mature much in this area, but when you get into childhood, you will see memory time slightly increase, and as you become older, it's just going to increase. It possibly decreases as you really get into late adulthood, as there are some illnesses that can lead to that. And then my next normative cognitive development would be language development. It can be really seen throughout the lifetime. During infancy, babies are able to recognize their mother's voice and can discriminate between languages. However, they don't have the ability to speak yet. They do coo and make little baby noises, but they don't have the ability to talk yet. Toddlerhood is when children really begin to develop these basic language skills, and they really make more improvements there. For normative socio-emotional developments, I listed interpersonal relationships. These relationships might look different at different ages. For example, as a toddler, it might be your siblings and your parents that you have the relationship with, but as you grow older, it's going to be peers, maybe a significant other, or still your parents. Just kind of listed how those normative developments would look throughout life. And then for my next one, I did a normative development of self-perception, what it would look like. So infants don't really show self-perception, but their brain will develop quickly. Toddlers become more self-aware and are often able to recognize themselves in the mirror. During childhood, many children are egocentric. They're really just worried about themselves, not worried about anyone around them. And I just explained how this develops throughout life. A few examples that I had from this would be, so for physical, I stated that in Leo's case, it appears that his physical growth is within the normative range around age 4. This, however, does not last long as he becomes overweight in his later years of childhood. So for cognitive development, I also noted Leo's case as he shows a normative level of language development. We see his language drastically improve from the ages of 4 to 8. And then socio-emotional, I stated that normative interpersonal relationships can be displayed in Mark's study as he is shown to have a secure attachment with his parents. So for learning objective 5, we were supposed to demonstrate an understanding of how gender, ethnicity, class, historical period, and social location relate to the life course experience. For gender, I wrote that it has an impact on our life experiences. First of all, many individuals will have certain expectations for their life that align with their gender role. This role may differ for different cultures. We see an example of different gender roles in Robert's case, as he's expected to be the provider while his wife is kind of expected to take care of the household and take care of all the duties there. Historical period is the historical period in which a person is born or grows up might affect their life experiences. A group of people growing up during the same time are likely going to have the same experiences. They're going to see the same things. And what you experience in your childhood could affect how you think when you're older. Robert's case is a good example of this because he grew up during the civil rights movement, and this definitely shaped his experiences throughout his life. For socioeconomic status, I listed that Socioeconomic status also affects our life experience. This is basically just a household level of income, education, etc. People who share the same class are likely to share a number of things like jobs, hobbies, lifestyles, patterns of consumption, and these things can be shared throughout the lifetime, or it's possible that maybe you could change socioeconomic statuses. People in a lower socioeconomic status may have to work harder to one day experience it, some things that someone else may have already been born into. Robert is also an example of this because he was born in a lower socioeconomic status, but he worked hard and was able to climb the ladder and create a successful business, take care of his family. My fifth and final scholarly source states that in 2023, a study was conducted on the effects of socioeconomic status to depression of perimenopause women. In this study, researchers looked into self-esteem, happiness, family relationships, etc. The researchers found that socioeconomic status did have an effect on these women, however, not as great an effect as on the depression in these women. However, not as great an effect as the factors like happiness and self-esteem. This shows that socioeconomic status is a factor that should be considered when we look at someone's overall life experience. And then these are my references that I used. Thank you.